any purpose serve. When we come back, we'll talk more about diplomacy. We'll hear from diplomats in a moment.
I personally hope that some kind of peaceful situation could have been brought out of the talks. However, it takes two people to agree.
Washington, D.C. by Congressman Jim McDermott of Seattle, and joined in the studio with Major Marshall Smith of the, he's a Marine. Our counterpointers are here, while Crowley and John Carlson and Dr. Denny from the university stays with us. Let me start with Congressman McDermott. Congressman, a two-part question, if I may. Are we closer to war tonight, do you think, than we were 24 hours ago? And are you any more persuaded to support an early strike against the Iraqis than you were 24 hours ago?
Well, first of all, I answer the first question. I'm not sure we're any closer to war. I think we still have 6 days. There are many initiatives that are being worked on by a variety of different countries and groups, and I am still hopeful that we can find a way to make the negotiations process work. I think that if we give time for the sanctions to work, for the embargo to work, we will ultimately come to a peaceful solution without war. I am not persuaded that we should give a blank check to the president, which is what he's asking for. I will support what Sam Nunn has come from the Senate with, which is to say, give it more time. We're not saying we won't go to war, but this is not the time to do it now.
John Carlson, you heard the congressman. I'm inclined to say to him, and I will say to you too, how much time? At what point is too much time?
Aaron, at the point that deadline hits, we can do one of three things. We can fight, we can run away, which is total capitulation, or we can wait. And if we wait after the deadline, if we postpone and set another deadline, then we have blinked. And I don't think Saddam Hussein is somebody that you should blink in front of.
So do we go the 15th?
I think
the 16th?
We have to be prepared to go on the 15th, and he has to know that.
Congressman, is there a point in your mind where you are prepared to support a war in the Gulf?
Not at this point. I think we have spent 5.5 months building up a war machine and haven't talked at all. Now we've talked for 6 hours today. I think we can talk for another 6 days or 6 weeks. Even 6 months would not be, in my mind, too long. I am very patient if it means that no American young men and women will die. And I think that that's the bottom line as far as I'm concerned. I'll talk forever. Not forever literally, but for a long time, rather than having people killed.
Major Smith, you're listening to all this. You're getting married, what, tomorrow or the next day, and then shipping out on Saturday. Do you think the time for talking is over?
I believe in the president's policy. We'd be kind of foolish to attack 1 second after midnight of the deadline. We should follow through in the policy, and I'm a little bit at a loss for words here. I have to say what I believe.
Well, why don't you say what you believe? Are you uncomfortable with the divisions that you hear, not just in the American government, but among fellow citizens? Because after all, Congressman McDermott represents a constituency that no doubt in many ways feels as he does.
I believe the congressman has his good point. He represents a contingency that has this right to voice its opinion. You
don't necessarily agree with the opinion, but they have a right to voice it.
That's correct.
Okay. Dr. Denny, we need a diplomat for a minute. How should we look at the sanctions question? You know, it's an interesting one, and these administrations, to me, at one point say in some countries sanctions are foolish, we should never do them. In other cases, they think sanctions are terrific, we ought to do them. In this case, they say sanctions are terrific, we'll do it for a little bit, and then we won't do it anymore.
I think it's important to think of sanctions as something that's along a continuum of force. The end of the road, if sanctions don't work, we probably will use force and should use force, but I don't think we've given sanctions an adequate try. If we had had the international community organized against Mussolini to the extent that they were this time against Saddam, Mussolini would be a footnote in history. Because those sanctions would undoubtedly have worked at the League of Nations. And what I'm saying is this is a golden moment. It's a chance to make the organized pressure of the international community work, and I think we should do it. force does have to be threatened on the way. The president is right about that. But I think we should escalate more slowly, press harder on the diplomatic front, and wait until the sanctions take some kind of a bite. The sanctions have already made it more difficult for him to fight us.
Congressman, one of the things I hear a lot is that Congress is making the effort by the soldiers in the desert more difficult by all this divisiveness there, and that in fact you are creating a greater risk. Can you briefly respond to that?
Well, I think the Democratic debate is a part of what's made this country strong. What got us into Vietnam and got us into trouble was that we refused to debate it before we got ourselves enmeshed in it. One of the most striking statements I read in reviewing what went on in Vietnam, because I came into politics out of the Vietnam thing, was a statement by Ernest Greening, the senator from Alaska, in August of 1964 at the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, who said, if there's a war, it will ultimately end at a peace table. If it's going to go to a peace table, why not the peace table first before you kill? And we killed 58,000 people in that war and hundreds of thousands of casualties of other types who were not killed. I think that we ought to do everything we can and be patient, and as Dr. Denny says, give the sanctions a chance to work. I think there's no magic in the 15th of January.
Congressman, thanks. Walter, do you think we're going to war?
I would say that the odds of a peaceful settlement are still in the 50-50 range. I think that Iraq, in terms of its objectives, scored a diplomatic victory today, to use Carlson's macho rhetoric. It did not blink at the United States, which is a much more significant act than the United States not blinking. I think that we made an error in this situation of going for a forceful eviction of Iraq from Kuwait as our objective, rather than a long siege. Sieges, by the way, are a preferred means of warfare in the Middle East.
With due respect to my colleague, one of the problems, isn't it, I mean, honestly, is that this coalition is a very complicated set of countries whose interests at this moment, today, may be in support of the United States, but tomorrow, who knows?
Yes, but go to war. Go to war there and see the state of that coalition the day after the shooting starts.
Yeah, a very good point. Quickly around the table. John, you think we're going to war?
I think one of the few things I agree with Walt Crowley. I think it's still 50-50. I think that Saddam has wanted a way out of this, and I think we may yet find a way. I think we've got a 50-50 chance.
Dr. Brewster, did you hear anything today that makes you think we are or are not?
I'm not quite as optimistic as 50-50. I think we've got about a 70% chance to go to war the way it stands. I think the best news is the Secretary of State firmly and clearly endorsing, almost to the point of appearing to think of it, sending the Secretary General out, and the role of the European allies if they'll get busy. I think those two parts are very hopeful.
Congressman, very quickly, do you think we're going to war here?
No, I don't. I very seldom agree with John Carlson, but in this instance, I think there is an opening, and I agree with Dr. Denny. When the Secretary of State is willing to talk about the Secretary General of the UN doing this, I think there is a crack, and I think we have to pursue that crack.
Thank you, Congressman. Major Smith, you're probably the most important voice in all of this. Do you think we're going to war tonight?
I think we're prepared to go to war. History's being written here, and two forces are coming together to meet head-on, and something's going to have to give. He's either going to have to leave Kuwait, or how much force is going to take him to move depends upon how much the Allies are willing to sacrifice and put against him.
Thank you. Thank all of you. You be safe over there. The rest of you join us again one of these nights. We have the final...